Some Johnny Cash this morning on WJOB 1230 M 104.7 FM. And we've got a caller, so let's go right to that caller. Good morning, you're on the air.
Good morning, Tom.
Good morning.
You know, earlier in the morning, Mad Mac was speaking about subjects that aren't talked about on this station. I used to bring that up, that there were several subjects that were never spoken upon, and I basically gave up. So I just try to add information that I know hasn't been spoken on the airways, but that way you don't have to rehash something that I heard 15,000 times. And I give you credit, sir, for having the guts, and I'll use that term. That's exactly what I want to say. I think it was a week ago or maybe longer when you mentioned the former Hammond City worker that basically went to jail, did something allegedly inappropriate with an underage individual. You're the only one that brought that up.
Yeah, that was that. Look, that is a horrible story. That's just a horrible situation.
Right.
Yeah.
And I understand you shouldn't go on here and start saying additional information that you have no knowledge of. But if it's in the paper and it's talked about and it's both dailies, it's there. It's fair. That's fair game. In addition, I noticed former coach from Hammond with the Portage mysteriously just had to resign. Nobody, the sports station, nobody has to, no speculation, no nothing. But if it would have been a steel worker or police officer
or a priest,
or a priest, as I said, a priest, we could just speculate all day long, right? Let's be honest. Fast forward, Dilo's saying how this another coach in South County is going to be the up and coming baseball prima donna of the region, unexpectedly resigned. Don't say nothing about it. Let's not talk about it. Let's move on and let's talk about how tough we are because we're a sports station. In addition, getting back to the criminal aspect of government, here it is in the paper, never discussed on this issue. A HUD person from the city of Gary allegedly put hands on women, taken to jail, allegedly battery. People are going to say, well, he doesn't work for the city, but he has political clout within the city. Look at the boards, okay? No one at all, period, spoke about that subject on this station. So my point is, I know people like to beat on Mad Mac, and I know he comes off, and I've said this in the past, like a bull in a china shop.
He comes off like a mini version of Donald Trump.
Right. But his point, if you tear it all away and quit alleging he's this and he's that, you're offended about this, you're offended about quote unquote names. I'd love to get on that to you, because I remember this station when you were a person who was paid on this station referred to you as Tom Dabertin. You didn't get offended.
Oh,
I remember.
Listen, I mean, actually, not only was I not offended, but I even hired him as a DJ.
Of course.
We had fun. We had
fun. Had fun.
We had fun. We used to cajole each other. We used to rip on each other. But the only thing that I have to say, and I'm going to pitch this idea actually formally to Jed. I would like to do a series of podcasts about the history of WJOB. I know it, as he knows very, very well. And one of the things that I want to do with the podcast is I want to take a trip over to the transmitter and give viewers of the podcast the actual view that Preacher would have had standing underneath that tower in a thunderstorm, smoking cigarettes. Because I still remember, he'd say something and I would get a little upset. And I'd say to him, Preacher, that's okay, because God's going to get even with you the next time you're out there smoking a cigarette underneath that tower, while there's a lightning storm. And he'd laugh. And one day I was there, I walked in, and he sees me and he goes, hey, And I said, what? And he goes, yeah, I think your prediction, you got to stop that. And I said, what are you
Right.
talking about? And he goes,
It's
I was standing out underneath the tower and lightning hit. He said, just as I'm walking back in, and I thought, okay, Dabertin's going to get me. So, yeah,
but it
he's
was
an
a
okay guy.
joke. I mean,
It
how?
was.
I mean, he used to call really Squirrely Harris, a caller who hated my guts, knew my name. He used to call me Julius for Julius Caesar because
Right.
whatever the background in the military. But it just preacher, if he liked you, that's why he labeled me from a town that I moved from. I said, priest, I don't even live there anymore. He said, too bad, that's your nickname.
Hey, let me throw another one out. Okay, MX and I consider each other friends. The first meme that MX ever did
Was of you, probably.
was of me as Bigfoot. Yes.
Right, Bigfoot. There you go. Yeah, I mean that's another one. You know what I mean? It's like this new. Maybe Dito's going through a menopause or something where you have now you're.
He just showed up. You know what?
But seriously, I want to talk seriously back to this notion of putting hands on women, because we have another elected official in the past was in big trouble for that. What is it with men today?
Okay, so let me just address that. You're talking about the former attorney general who went after a state, amongst others, a state rep
Right,
from this
amongst
area.
others,
Okay,
yeah.
who's a friend of mine. Her husband is. Look, I don't understand it. I don't understand where that's one where I'll never understand. And a lot of people, a lot of listeners and viewers know, I have done a lot of work on sexual harassment.
Yes.
As one attorney tells me all the time, I should write a textbook for attorneys on sexual harassment. Since I've done about 350 investigations, I've done tens of thousands of trainings of individuals I've trained on sexual harassment. And I've testified in court cases and all that when it comes to sexual harassment. My point is this: when you are acting in any capacity, you need to treat women just like you would want your mother, your spouse, or your daughter to be treated. Okay? I've made this comment. You've heard me say it plenty of times on the air. I always said I wanted the same opportunities for Rachel that I wanted for Tom, except that I didn't want Rachel to play football, and I didn't want Tom to become homecoming queen.
Right.
And Rachel and Tom always point out that she didn't play football. She played softball and she played volleyball. But my son always points out that he was the homecoming king. So, look, I want everything to be the same I want the same opportunities for my daughter that I want for my son.
100%.
But when it comes to respect, you wouldn't want your son to be treated that way, and you shouldn't want your daughter to be treated that way, and everybody is somebody's son and somebody's daughter.
Right.
And so, you know what? We talk about advanced society, and we still do the same dumb things. And if somebody, the case that you talked about, the first one, the treatment, these were young girls. They were underage.
100%.
It's just horrible. And you talk about a guy that ought to spend the rest of his life in prison. There's one, if it's true, there's one that belongs there.
But Tom, there's many. I don't know if it's just us getting older or you just read about it more, because it seems like you can't go a week or so without reading something in the paper where somebody's doing something that gentleman allegedly done locally. Locally. I mean, I just it just baffles my mind, man, that this happens. And I know.
Let me bring this up, because people say to me every so often when I do training on sexual harassment, they'll say, "Well, there are a lot of false claims of sexual." There are some. I've handled some. I've investigated some.
Right.
But I will tell you, the vast majority are legitimate.
Exactly.
The vast majority are legitimate, and for people to think, well, it's not a significant percent. I'd have to go back and think about it, but I'd say it's probably under 10%.
Exactly.
So, and again, in some of those cases, it's a misunderstanding.
Right.
But the idea that you can just go out and you can molest somebody, you can take advantage of them, especially someone who's underage.
Yes,
just as creepy as can be.
it's as creepy as can be. It totally is. But again, if it was anybody in any other profession, it would be openly talked about. But it seems like this is government. It's something to do with government. See, so many people locally love government, Tom. They just love government. We're supposed to look to people in government as the kings and queens of the world. I don't. I don't, Tom.
Well, they're not kings and queens. Look, they're public servants, okay?
Public servants, right.
And so I was watching a Senate or House hearing the other day. It was on the news, and they were, the sign said the Honorable so and so,
Right.
testifying. I thought to myself, this whole thing about No King's Day.
Right.
Why do we use those terms?
Exactly.
The Honorable, okay?
100%.
Look, you will get elected to an office, but the Honorable. Well,
Right.
I mean, Bill Dolan, I think, and I would probably be able to do an entire show about less than honorable 63 individuals. So,
And I'll get off after this, Tom. That Padilla, that senator, if he would have done that, if that would have been you, and you removed any type of way aggressively against law enforcement, you would have went to jail.
look, he was a buffoon. That was a publicity
should have went
stunt.
to jail.
That was a publicity stunt. But you know what also bothers me? Is the number of comments that are made, since you're talking about Kristi Noem, okay?
Right.
She's an attractive woman.
Right.
Okay. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging that Kristi Noem is an attractive woman.
Right.
But some of the comments that are
Oh,
made,
well, yeah.
okay,
Right.
or Pam Bondi.
Right.
I mean, it's one thing to make those comments to your friends or to your family, but it's another when these pundits make these comments. I mean, Pam Bondi is no dumb blonde.
No.
Okay, she's a very bright, capable attorney general. Kristi Noem is yes, she's attractive, but she's doing her job as Secretary of Homeland Security.
Right.
She was the former governor of was it South Dakota?
Yes.
I mean, why is it that we always have to talk about their appearance?
Right.
I mean, really and truly, it just gets to be ridiculous, and I think it's probably part of the a feeder system to the problem you're talking about. But I do want to point this out. I do want to leave you with this. The majority of cases that I've handled when it comes to sexual harassment have not
Yes.
been in government.
Okay.
There is in fact, the level of sexual harassment that occurs in the private sector is higher than it is in government.
I can believe that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is because they do work in government, and there's the public, the public perception, and again, there's a little bit more pressure on those individuals to act accordingly. I think that you see it less in government than you see it in the private sector. The private sector is where the majority of sexual harassment cases occur.
Good day, sir.
Have a great day. Let's take a quick break. It's 8 o'clock in the region. You're listening to Tom Dabertin on the morning call on WJOB 1230 AM, 104.7 FM, the TuneIn app, and JED TV. We'll be right back after these commercial announcements. We'll be doing traffic and weather, and then at 8:30, the Town of Dyer Show.